Yeah.
And I think about that in context of the disciples, Jesus, like they were always with him. They observed everything that he did.
Yeah.
And so another piece that we talk about a lot within our development program is proximity is influence.
What is up, worship leaders? My name is Dalton Schaefer. Welcome to the channel Spirit Truth. I'm on with a guest today, Jarryd Foreman from Austin Stone Worship. What's up, man?
What's up? What's up, guys? Thanks for having me today.
Yeah,
Appreciate
man,
it.
excited to talk to you again. This conversation is really the product of a phone call that we had several months ago talking about development and some of y'all's residency program at the Austin Stone. I've been really impacted personally by a lot of the material that you guys put out and the teaching around worship leading that's come out of the Stone. But we wanted to talk today about developing worship teams and worship leaders. But I just want to start, Jarryd, tell us a little bit about how you got connected at the Austin Stone.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll try to do the short version of this. I graduated from Belmont in 2006 with a music degree and
Okay.
was really kind of wrestling with the Lord about what was next for me.
Yeah.
And I felt like the Lord was calling me into ministry. And at the time, I'm originally from Texas. And so I was living in Nashville at the time. And really the only thing I knew to do as far as next steps was to go to seminary.
Yeah.
So the only seminary I knew of was at Southwestern in Fort Worth. And
Okay.
so moved back to Texas that summer, started going to seminary, getting a master's degree in music, and really had no idea about what it meant to lead worship or to
Yeah.
do that full time as a career. I'd grown up in the church, and so my only context for a worship leader was, the minister of music who was up at the podium like waving his arms, during
Yeah.
music. And
Yeah.
I
Totally.
don't know that I want to do that. That doesn't seem like me. I had, in Nashville, I was connected to some really cool songwriters and played the guitar and piano. And I'm like, I want to use my gifts somehow to serve the church in that way. And so
Yeah.
started going to seminary, started serving at a church part time, knew absolutely nothing, had no idea what I was doing. I had to go to another friend of mine to help me plan like my first service because I'm like, I know how to sing these songs, but I don't know how to put them all together.
Yeah.
Um, and so that for me began this journey of just being a worship leader and learning what that meant. And at the time, it was more, learning by doing. I never really had anybody who kind of took me under their wing to show me things. I would just observe and watch what people were doing. I met my wife in 2009, and at the time, she was a covenant member at the Village Church up in
Okay.
Dallas. And so I would go with her on Saturday nights to service. And that's where I met Michael Bleeker. And he and I became really good friends. He was the
Yeah.
worship pastor of the Village at the time. And man, honestly, a lot of my development as a worship leader was watching him and
Yeah.
seeing what he does. And oh, that's pretty cool how he put that song together with this one. And
Yeah.
what
Totally.
capo, he's capoing on this fret on this song. Why is he doing that? And
Hmm.
it was really just learning by observing. And so that's kind of what I did for a few years. I had my first full time worship pastor position in 2009 at a church out in Aledo, which is out west of Fort Worth, and that was a really sweet church for us. And spent 4 years there, and then God moved us to another church east of Dallas for a couple years. And that season was really difficult for me and my wife. It was a hard season. It felt like a desert season kind of thing, and
Yeah.
it was in that season that my wife and I really began to wrestle with, like, is ministry going to be a long-term calling for me? Is this really
Hmm.
what the Lord has? And by that time, I'd kind of known about Austin Stone Worship. They put out their first album. I knew a couple of the guys on staff, had become acquaintances and all that. But really, I wasn't really connected with them a whole lot. And then it was around 2015 that my wife and I just sensed that a new season was coming, and we didn't know what it was. And I tell the story all the time, but we had two kids at the time, and my youngest son, I remember rocking him one night to sleep, and I was scrolling through Twitter like a good dad does, while he's rocking his kid. I
Yeah.
was scrolling through Twitter and I saw Austin Stone Worship had posted about residency, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. So I told my wife about it, and my wife is very much like, let's jump in, let's do it. And I'm like,
Wow.
no way. I've been in ministry almost 10 years at this point, full-time ministry. To me, it felt like doing residency was something like, I'm going to take a step back for a
Yeah.
season. I
Yeah.
was in my early 30s, had two kids. the thought of moving from Dallas to Austin scared me, and residency support race. So I would have had the
Yeah.
support race for 2 years, and it was very scary. I didn't know how I was going to be able to do that. But lo and behold, we came to Austin. We met with some of the pastors here, met with Chris Collins, who would eventually be my supervisor
Yeah.
at the Austin Stone. And we launched into this journey of going into residency in summer of 2015. Moved our whole family to Austin, support raised. Scariest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
Support raising for 2 years, because you're really just trusting the Lord with everything. But it's also the most exciting season ever, because literally everything just comes from the Lord. You're seeing him move in ways that you hadn't before, leaving a comfortable job, a full-time position with great benefits, to something that's really unknown. And we headed into the season of residency with like, Lord, do what you want. We're really trying to see if you're continuing to call us into ministry, and we don't know what's after residency. We're just kind of going into this with faith. And so we moved to Austin, and that began the best 2 years of residency. It was an incredible season for us. It was a lot of healing that took place. And it was in that season that God really just reminded me that this is what I have for you. This is what I'm calling you to. And, he's continued to call me into ministry, I feel like, ever since. And so, but one thing I want to mention too is Chris Collins was my supervisor, and he was really the first one to kind of take me under his wing as a worship leader. And it was in that moment that I realized that I had been missing out the last 9 or 10 years, because I hadn't had anybody like really pouring into me and saying, this is why you do what you do, and then really discipling me too. Because the majority of it for me was like education, seminary. And I mean, we can talk more in depth about seminary later, but I don't know that it's for everybody. I don't know that it's for every worship leader. I have doubts as to whether I should have gone to seminary or not. I met my wife there, so I know it was worth it.
The Lord was in it.
Yes, that's right. But also, like, there's nothing that can replace the one-on-one discipleship, somebody pouring into you directly, development piece, and I've been missing that. And I finally got that when I got to the Stone. And it wasn't just Chris, but it was also Aaron Ivey and Marcus Dawes and Brett Land and Jimmy McNeil and all those guys who are, we do the same things, and they're my brothers now, but they like poured into me in ways that I'd never experienced. So, and it was just the best season for me and my wife and my family. And then I got hired on full time in April of 2017 as one of the worship leaders. And because I had gone through this season of residency, they also wanted me to kind of oversee the development program within Austin Worship. And so I get the best of both worlds. I get to lead worship every single week. I'm the North Congregation worship leader at our church, which is in Round Rock, and then I also get to pour into residents, which is really cool to see it kind of flipped, because I was poured into for a couple of years, and now I saw the benefit of what it was. And so I'm super passionate about raising up the next generation of worship leaders and being able to pour in. So that's kind of my story as a whole. We love Austin. Austin is where we feel called to be, and the Stone is where we feel called to be. And I tell worship leaders all the time, when they're looking for a church to be at, you want to go to a church that you would go to if you weren't on staff, if you weren't leading worship. And that's the case with the Stone. I mean, as we came to the end of the season of residency, I was like, I don't know where God's going to send us, but we feel called to be at the Stone, and we feel like call it the Stone. Sorry, I keep calling it that, but yeah, it's where we feel called to be, and we feel God continuing to call us into ministry. So that's a story in a nutshell about how we got here.
No, it's powerful. I love seeing that. One, just you see worship leaders leading well, like Michael Bleeker. I remember seeing him lead at a doxology theology conference, just one of the sessions. And that moment marked my leadership moving forward. The way that he used the scriptures in his leading has changed the way that I lead worship. And so you see great leaders lead, and then you put yourself in the place to be mentored and encouraged, like at a residency program like you guys do. And so I would say, what are some of the big, when you think about the most, why it's important to be discipled and to do development, to be developed? What are some of the big things that come to mind for why it's important?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you can start theologically. Like, you think about the disciples, and you think about Jesus, and he poured into the 12, but he also had 3, like Peter, James, and John, who he poured into more specifically. And then you look at their life after the resurrection, and I mean, they just shared the gospel everywhere. You know what I mean? They went to the ends of the earth. And so I think that was the work of Jesus, like really pouring into them and discipling them. And so, I mean, I think it works the same way. I mean, I think that one-on-one discipleship that I received from Chris during residency was super important, not only because he would give me feedback anytime I led worship. I mean, it did not fail. Anytime I led worship, he'd pull me aside afterwards and he'd be like, "Hey, you did great on these things, but here's some things I need you to to work on."
Yeah.
And I'd be like, "Wow, that's amazing. Like nobody has ever told me that, you
Yeah.
know?" And so for me, the feedback piece was really huge. And I mean, we can talk more about that in depth, because I think feedback is the absolute best way to develop someone, is
Okay.
by
Yeah.
receiving feedback. So
Yeah.
as somebody who is developing, like you need to be able to give feedback to that person, but also as a worship leader in your church, you also need to be open to receiving feedback at any
Yep.
time,
Yep.
always. And then the other thing that I got from Chris that was really helpful was just proximity to him. Like my wife and I were always at their house. Like we saw how they lived their life.
Yeah.
And I think about that in context of the disciples, Jesus, like they were always with him. They observed everything that he did.
Yeah.
And so another piece that we talk about a lot within our development program is proximity is influence. Like to have
Mm.
any influence over the people you lead, you have to have proximity to them.
Yeah.
And not
Yeah.
just like on Sundays, not just through planning center emails, not just through all these things, but actually like in their life. Like you need to be able to go and sit and have coffee and talk about what's going on in their life. Like you
Yeah.
need to be their friend.
Yep.
And so I think that's one piece that we as worship leaders can miss sometimes in the people we're developing. It's not just Sundays or even weekly rehearsals. Like you need to have proximity to the people. If
So
some
good.
we get mad sometimes when people decline our planning center emails and we wonder why they're not faithful or why they're not showing up. But man, a lot of the time we're not diving into their stories and understanding why.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
is it? What's going on in their life? And so, man, proximity as influence is a huge thing. To have any influence over the people you're developing, you have to be around them. You have to have
Yeah.
proximity to them.
Dude,
So
that is so good. If you're watching this, you need to write that down. That is so good. Um, Man, if there's a worship leader watching this right now and he's thinking, okay, why would I want to develop my team? What would you say to that person?
I would say, I mean, pretty practically, you need to realize that you're not going to be in that position forever.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to say that I'd be leading worship into my 50s and 60s, but I don't know. I might not be. And so, like, the church is going to keep going. The church is like God's glory is still going to exist through the church. And so we
Yeah.
need to be raising up the next generation of worship leaders who will
Yep.
come behind us and help lead. And honestly, like in us developing people, we're kind of taking more and more of a back seat of like, I'm going to delegate these things that I see as most important and give you the chance to be developed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think, and I'm like this because I'm very type A. I will admit that I don't delegate things very well because I want
Yeah.
to hold on to them, and like I'm going to plan things and it's going to be like this, and I'm not going to delegate, but that's not really leadership. And I've had to really press into myself
Yeah.
on those areas. Like we need to be the best delegators as worship leaders, delegate the things that
Yeah.
are most important, because ultimately those things are what is going to help other people flourish in their leadership. If
Yeah.
Chris Collins wouldn't have given me things to both achieve and to fail at, honestly, because residency
Yeah.
was all about like, I'm going to give you stuff and you're going to fail at it, but that's a
Yep.
good chance for you to grow
Yeah.
and for you to
Totally.
get feedback on it. And so there might be a little nugget in there, like give things to people that that they could probably fail at, but that also you have the chance to kind of pastor them and give them feedback, and they're going to grow from it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And so I think development has to happen, because ultimately you're not going to be in that position forever, and you need people to come behind you. And man, also I think too, like I think sometimes worship leaders, when we're looking for people to hire in positions or bringing people in, I think it's too easy to look outside, instead of the
Yeah.
people who are right there in front of you in your
Yeah.
ministry, who are already bought into the vision and ministry
Yes. Yeah.
of your
Totally.
church. You know what I mean? like, and it's hard work. It's much easier to look on the outside and be like, I need to hire a worship leader. Whereas, there might be somebody right under your nose who you've been discipling for 2 years, who has the skills, who God may be calling into ministry, who you can ask to kind of step up into that role. And so that's one of the things that I've learned a lot at the Stone. And our residency program, it's 10 years old now. It's gone through a lot of iterations, and I know a lot of people in this video will watch this and be like, well, I need to start a residency program and do all these things. And I kind of want to caution people against that. You don't necessarily need to start a program. You need to just start with a person. Like, there is somebody right now who is in your ministry, whether they're a guitar player or maybe they serving kids or whatever it may be, who is looking for someone to develop them. And you just need to be open to whoever that might be, and I mean, you can look to places like we've learned a lot over the years, and we love resourcing worship leaders to develop the people in their context, but a lot of times, man, when people are looking for someone to develop, you don't necessarily need to bring in all these people from other places. Like, who are the people right there in front of you? Who are the people you have proximity to already that you can develop? So
I remember at my last church, there was a 13-year-old kid who came up to me, real high-pitched voice, real young. He went, hey, I play the bass. Can I join the worship team? And at this point, I was in college and had just started leading a college ministry worship team, and was helping on Sundays and different things. And I just remember asking him, was like, do you read the Bible? And his response was, not really. and I said, hey, would you meet me on Sundays, like at 7:00 in the morning before rehearsal starts, and we could just hang out for 30 minutes and read the Bible? And he said yes. 5 years later, that guy, he's 18 now. He's one of the best keyboard players I know.
Wow.
An incredibly gifted worship leader and singer. And I got to, I mean, we're still super good friends. His name's, a shout out to William Crockett. One of my best friends, and you can go find him on a Spotify under Douglas. He's actually a really good songwriter. Like,
cool.
He's like so gifted, and he's like releasing music. He writes secular music, but will share the gospel in his songs. Like, really is intentional in his shows about sharing the gospel. Leads worship at another church to help serve there. But so gifted. But it was a young guy, easily could have been overlooked. Did not have at the time a lot of musical talent, but was willing to show up and read the Bible and was willing to be developed.
Absolutely.
And over the course of 5 years, he ended up traveling. Like, at 14, he was in my band traveling around with a bunch of college students leading worship.
That's cool.
And it was cool to see how the Lord developed that. And you really used him in a lot of ways to stir my own heart towards development and seeing what people can be, not just where they are now. Because you want to look at someone and say, okay, well, right now you're not like the best worship leader in the world. You can't sing. You only play bass. But if you want to keep showing up week after week, I know what you could become. And that's a beautiful thing to be able to see that in people and call it up in them.
Absolutely,
and so, man, I love seeing that.
Just seeing potential. I tell this story a lot, but Jaleesa Mccreary, who is one of our worship leaders, she started serving our church in kids ministry. Like, she was just singing in kids ministry. And I think one of the worship leaders, I don't remember if it was Aaron or not, but he was like, man, this girl has some potential. And so she moved from kids ministry up to students ministry, where she started leading with a band. And I mean, people started to take notice because she was faithful in the little things. You know what I mean? It wasn't for her, like she's an incredible singer, like one of the best vocalists ever, but for her, it wasn't like, I'm going to be up on that main stage. No, she just wanted to serve her church. She just wanted to plug in. And it was through that development program that she eventually joined Aaron Ivy's band, started leading downtown. And now she's one of our full-time worship leaders with a band of her own that goes around the campuses, So you never know, you never know who's there. Look at the people who are most faithful, I would say would be a good thing. We get people all the time who, and I'm sure you guys listening get this all the time too. People come up in your church and they're like, I play a certain instrument. I do these things really well. Like, can I play on Sundays? Can I join the worship ministry? And I think the first response shouldn't necessarily be, sure, like come join us at rehearsal, but it should be, absolutely, like, come and help us set up the stage, or come and help us roll cables, or like you said, like, let's get together and read the Bible. Like, you need to test people's faithfulness early on, in the small things, because if they're
Yeah,
not faithful in those little things, then they're not
totally.
going to be faithful when you give them more. And I learned that like through my residency. I kind of saw it, looking back on it. Chris would give me a little bit, and then he would see that okay, you're doing that pretty well. Let's give you more. Let's give you more
Yeah,
and more and
that's
more. Give
good.
you more leadership. And so to have the best leaders in your ministry, like look for the people who you have proximity to already, who are already bought in, but then also test their faithfulness
Yeah,
early on.
totally.
You know? So
Yeah.
if they can't show up early to set up a stage or do whatever you guys have going on, if they're not faithful to set up pro presenter or do all these various things, then they're not going to be faithful to lead worship every week.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think too, to keep in mind, for people listening, like developing people, it's not like it doesn't get you out of doing more work. I think a lot of people have this false dichotomy. It's like, oh, I'll get an intern and then they
yeah,
can do all the things I don't want to do. That's not really development.
that
I
is
think
not.
development doesn't make your job easier. What I've found is it makes your job much harder, but
It
it's
does, man.
totally worth it.
It's totally worth
It
it.
is so worth the extra effort and time, and you'll see it pay off in discipleship and raising up leaders and seeing these people that over the course of years grow in their, not just their worship leading ability, but their ability to lead their families and be husbands and disciple makers and
Yeah,
carrying the gospel with them wherever they go. And it's totally worth it, the
absolutely.
extra time and effort it takes to do that.
Absolutely. Yep. It's hard
um
work. It's hard work, but
yeah,
it's worth it.
absolutely. All right, how do you balance between putting the emphasis on character, competency, and theology? How do you navigate that what can be a challenge sometimes, especially in the worship leader culture?
Yeah, man. It's are you talking about me specifically or in
Yeah, just
residency
your
or
thoughts on that.
yeah, man, I think they all have to be balanced really well, because if you think about the life of the worship leader, like we need to be the best theologians. You know what I mean? We're
Yes.
not just people who lead songs. And
Yep.
I don't want to be that, and you don't
Yeah.
want to be that. I don't want to
Yeah.
just go and sing a bunch of songs. But I want to, like, if we're singing that song Holy is Our God, I want to understand why we're singing that and where it comes from in scripture.
Yes.
Because then, I mean, the work of the Holy Spirit when you're leading, and I mean, you probably had these moments, but the Holy Spirit will just bring to mind certain scriptures or certain things that you need to say to people. And those things only come if you're in the Word, if
Yeah.
you're like learning things. And so
Yeah.
as a worship leader, I think it's easy sometimes to just kind of coast, to just be like, oh, I need to plan my set, what songs work really well together, what keys work really well together. But really like sitting down with a liturgy and being like, how can I lead my people best to see God for who he really is, based
Yeah.
on, what the sermon passage is that week. Something that just came to mind, like we're going through the book of Matthew, and we're into some really like hard passages,
Yeah.
like last week was on the rich young ruler, and then this past Sunday was on the first shall be last, last shall be first, that kind of thing. Those passages don't really lend themselves to like great songs, like rich young ruler. There's not a song that I'm like, oh gosh, this one's going to be a home run, you
Yeah.
know and
Passion hasn't
so
released the rich young ruler song
yeah,
yet.
absolutely. But what it's done for me is be like, I need to get into the Word. What is the theme that God is
Yeah.
talking about here? And with the rich young ruler specifically, it was like the spirit of surrender, really. Like, where
That's
is our
good.
treasure? Those kinds of things. And without knowing theology, it would be really hard to plan a set that way. Because I also like, I think it's so important that we marry the songs with the truth that's being preached on. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's not our
Absolutely.
job just to plan songs separate from where the message is going. Like, we need
Yeah.
to work really hard as worship leaders to marry those things together.
Yeah.
So having good theology, always being a learner, reading books, those kinds of things. We have a development program here at our church called the Austin Stone Development Program, where it's real theology heavy. I mean, it's going through Wayne Grudem's systematic theology, and
It's great.
I went through it when I first got here, and I'm thinking about going through it again
Yeah.
this coming year, just because it's like rich in theology. I mean, you're studying everything that you
Yeah.
would on a seminary level,
Yeah.
So that's been really good. And I think as worship leaders, we need to be the best theologians to be able to
Yeah.
connect the truth of the songs with the truth of what we're hearing. And then competency wise, man, gosh, I don't ever want to be stagnant in my craft, you know? So I think every worship leader is different. But I'm always trying to challenge myself. I play keys a lot, but I'm trying to challenge myself with new sounds and those kind of things. And I lead from keys, so I don't get into the software stuff a whole lot because I don't want to really be thinking about it.
Yeah.
I definitely want to challenge myself to think of new sounds and to create new things and to be real creative with all the things that I'm playing and stuff. And so there's a keys player in one of our bands. His name's Chris Munoz, who he plays like gospel stuff really well. And so him and I have talked about like getting together and him showing me some of his chops, because I really want to grow in that area, and be able to play those kind of things. And then like during the week, I'll try to have some time to be creative, like whether that's writing songs or crafting a melody or writing something. I don't know. Like there needs to be something in our week where we're able to just kind of sit and be creative and not have to be administrative at it. Just sit and create the way that God's wired us to be.
Yeah.
And so for me, man, I love listening to music. I'm a huge hammock fan. I love listening to like instrumental kind of video type stuff, explosions in the sky, those kind of bands. I'm really into like retro kind of music right now, like FM84 and those kind of bands and stuff. And even the band that I travel with, we kind of have some of those sounds in it. And so, man, just like listening to music outside of worship music is okay. It's okay to do that and just to kind of be poured into. I told my wife a couple months ago, I was really feeling like down and not creative. I told her I didn't feel like a very deep well. And I know that in moments when I feel like that, it's because I'm not having enough things like fill me, like input wise, like I'm not reading enough or I'm not taking in enough to be able to pour out. Because as somebody in ministry, like, how tiring it can be constantly pouring out. And then the character piece for me is proximity to our team, because I'm really challenged and discipled by guys on our team. I have we call it, it's a little small group that we have that I meet with weekly that challenges me and calls me out on sin and is really my discipleship core. And so if you're listening to this and you don't have that, man, I would encourage you to seek somebody out to like just disciple you, as a Christian. Like you need that in your life. And the enemy is looking for any way to attack you, your marriage, your ministry, all that stuff. And so any way that you can safeguard against those things by having somebody disciple you and call out things and really speak into it is really helpful. So I would encourage you to have that. So that's the character piece for me. And just proximity to our team. Our team does a really good job of like encouraging one another, speaking into things. And so, yeah. And it fleshes out in lots of different ways, but that's the big one for me with character.
Man, that's great. Open question. Any closing thoughts when it comes to development before we go into some just fun little rapid fire questions? Just any closing thoughts to encourage someone who's watching this who maybe wants to be developed or wants to start developing their team?
Man, I would encourage anybody listening that really development is not an option. It's not something that you're going to hear today and be like, oh, that's cool. That's a cool idea. But development's not an option. Like there are people, it's discipleship at its core.
Absolutely.
God has called us to go and make disciples. And so why not start today? I'm hoping that as people are watching this, they're already thinking of people in their ministry who they can go and pour into. You know what I mean? And so people in our church are looking for someone to disciple them and to pour into them. So whether it's through worship leading or just like reading the Bible together, like I think it's that important. And it's something that God calls us to, man. And then I'll hit on this, like I hit on this earlier, but just having a culture of feedback. If you as a worship leader are not receiving regular feedback on your worship leadership, and not just like yeah, you did great, that was awesome, or something like that, but like real, like constructive, precise feedback, go and ask for it. Like ask your pastor every week. Say every week on Monday morning, I'm going to ask you about specific things, and I want you to give me some encouragement, and I also want you to give me some things that you think I can grow in, and be honest with me. Like, I can take it. I trust in Jesus enough to know that I can take it, and that he ultimately is my identity, and my identity is not in my gifting, but I'm going to trust Jesus as you give me feedback. And I never had that until I got to the Stone. I went through 10 years of ministry not having that, where it was just like every Sunday was a pat on the back. And then I get here on, at the Stone, and Chris Collins is saying, bro, you look over people's heads when you lead worship. You don't engage anybody with your eyes. And I'm like, huh, that's interesting. And as I did some soul searching, I was like, well, it's this approval of man kind of thing. If I looked at people in the eyes and they weren't singing, I would think that they thought I was a terrible worship leader, So it was like Chris's specific feedback kind of made me do some soul searching as to why I don't do those things. So giving and receiving feedback is huge. And then proximity, like have proximity to the people that you want to influence and develop.
It's good. So good. All right, let's finish this out with just a couple of quick questions. You said you lead from keys.
Yeah, man.
So I'm going to ask 2 questions. What keyboard do you play? And when you play guitar, because you play guitar as well, what do you lead from on guitar?
Man, I just play a regular Nord stage
Nice.
on keys. I mean, I'm super simple. I mean, I'll have like a piano patch. Sometimes I'll play an upright like piano patch on the Nord, and then I always have some sort of pad going. Our band is, and it fits our band really well. I mean, I would say too, just to encourage worship leaders, like you need your sounds to kind of fit with what your band sounds like. It doesn't, your Nord or whatever keys rig you have doesn't have to sound like Hillsong. It needs to sound like whatever is best for your band. And so my band, my guitar player, Jeremy, he's got a lot of sounds, a lot of like, fills up a lot of space. And so I don't feel the need a lot of times to fill up a lot of space with my keys rig, So I just play a regular old Nord weighted keys. It's great. I love it. I could add like main stage and stuff, but I don't really feel the need to right now.
Yeah.
And then, man, I play just a Taylor 314. I've had that thing for 10 years, and I've tried other guitars, but that one I just come back to all the time. It's a great guitar. So
love it. All right. What's the funniest thing or like mistake, something that's gone wrong while leading worship?
So this was 6 or 7 years ago at the church up in Dallas. We were singing the song Cornerstone. And I guess the old hymn, the first line says, but holy trust in Jesus' name. And there was another version of the song of that verse that said, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. So the lean and the trust. Dude, in the middle of the worship set, this might have been like the first song we sang, dude. But I sang it, but holy lust in Jesus' name. I got the words confused. And dude, I just lost it, like right in the middle. As soon as I sang that, I was like, oh man, it's over. I lost. And so I just started laughing. And
that's hard to recover from.
Recovered, So
man. Have you led that song since? That's the question.
I have.
Okay, good. So you've recovered then.
I have recovered, but it was terrifying. You know how it is, like when it first happens, you just like inside you're, oh my gosh, I've just ruined everything for everybody. So that was a funny moment.
That's a good one. What's your favorite worship song right now to lead on Sundays?
Oh man, that is a good question. We haven't led it yet, but this is one of my new favorite songs. I forget the artist. The song is called Make Room. The chorus goes, I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. It's a really good song. It's a girl-led song, but it's beautiful. I love it. Another song that's my favorite. Let's see. We did In Your Presence yesterday. That's off the Austin Stone worship record. It's a really good song. If you're looking for new upbeat tunes, it's a good one. Touch of Heaven is always a favorite for me.
Yeah.
Kind of an older Hillsong.
Yeah.
Tune.
Do you have a version of that out on Spotify as well?
I do. And I'm not saying that just to plug it, but
I know you're not, but I am. I'm saying that to plug it.
Yes, I
Cool.
really do love that song.
Cool.
And our church connects with it really, really well. So
Love it, man.
those are the ones that come to mind. Dude, there's so many songs right now
For
floating
sure.
in my head.
All right,
Um,
two more questions. What's your go-to order at a coffee shop slash best coffee shop in Austin? If you can even
oh
answer that.
man, that is a good question. Well, my go-to coffee, I'm a iced coffee drinker always,
Cool.
even in the wintertime. So
Yeah,
I'm either
that's good.
iced coffee or iced Americano of some
Nice.
sort. So I actually have one right here, right now, that I'm drinking
Nice.
Americano at a local coffee shop in Taylor, where I live. Oh man. Let's see. Good coffee shops. Houndstooth is a good one. Um, there's one in Cedar Park that I love called Red Horn. Go
Cool.
to a lot. Man, I feel like I'm missing so many. There's so much good coffee here. Um, I don't know. It'll pop out at me.
That's
It'll
good.
pop out. Those are the ones that come to mind right
Yeah.
now.
I'm an
So,
Arkansas guy, so anything that sells Onyx is where you got to go in
yeah,
Arkansas, and so
absolutely.
that's the good stuff.
That's the good stuff,
And then
man.
last one is just one of your favorite Bible verses that's had an impact on your life over the maybe the your whole life or maybe as of more recently.
Yeah, man. Man, honestly, Romans 8:1. There's no condemnation for those who are in Christ
Mm,
Jesus. There was a period in my college years that were somewhat dark, and so just reflecting on that
yeah,
verse, um, that there's really no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. That He doesn't just save us, but He also keeps us.
yeah,
And
it's
I
good.
just think there's something so beautiful in that. And I teach my kids that verse all the time. Like I'm asking my kids, what is Romans 8:1? There's no condemnation. And just a beautiful verse, man. And I mean, obviously the whole Romans 8 passage is super
Yeah,
powerful, but
man, that's
man,
good.
yeah, I love that verse.
Very
So
cool, man. Well,
yeah,
hey, thank you so much for being on my
absolutely.
channel talking about development. If someone wants to follow you or connect with you more,
Yeah,
where can they do that?
man. So I'm on Instagram at Jarryd Foreman. My name's spelled kind of weird. So
We'll
uh,
link it below.
yeah, that's good, man. I have a band. We're releasing new music next Tuesday. So it's at Jarryd Music. And then we have a website as well. And then you can follow any of our Austin Stone worship resources. Like I said earlier, we love developing worship leaders. And I mean, you guys feel free to reach out to me directly. Like I'm an open book. You can email me at jarryd@austinstone.org if you guys want to reach me. So I love conversations about development and worship leading and all those kinds of things. So love
Dude,
talking about it.
love it. This video will come out on Monday. So if you're watching this, his song comes out tomorrow. And so go
Nice.
check that out.
Thanks for
So
that.
yeah, very cool. And I'll link Spotify, Instagram, all that stuff below. I'll link to Austin Stone Worship and their records. You led a song that we've been leading a lot, the How Marvelous.
How
Y'all's
marvelous.
version
Yep.
of that
Mm.
is so good. I mean, it's been a joy for our church to sing that version. And so, yeah, thank you guys for watching this video. If you found it helpful, give it a like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the future videos that I release. And as always, we'll see you in the next video.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.